Hi there, and thank you for joining me for today's live reading of More Text Than Sex by Jim Shomos, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Track 1. Some days were like the sweet songs of your life, downloading into your brain's favorite playlist, rocking your smile on high rotation. Not today. Today was a punk rock meets experimental jazz shit of a day. Screaming loud, disjointed, no purpose. Annie didn't want to be in this boardroom. Room? The bigger these corporate dungeons, the more claustrophobic, the more they squeezed your soul into a sausage-like version of yourself. Her buddy and colleague Kat prowled around the room, marking her territory. Being a cool record label meant having a cool boardroom, but all the creative effort achieved was forging a huge man cave, sprinkled with iconic rock photos and gold and platinum album tributes for the label's stars. The only character came from the bluestone walls and original timber frames in the high ceiling. Delaney wouldn't have chosen the dungeon if he wasn't interested, Annie said. Their boss hated meetings, but loved the dungeon. Kat stopped prowling and tapped the posters on the dark mahogany table. If Delaney slashes through these ideas with his patriarchal wand, I'm out of here. Done. Gone. If it wasn't for Kat's spunk, Annie would have been gone from Merger Music eons ago. Kat and the 18-month anchor remaining around her creative neck from a 10-year contract of catastrophe. 547 days, and I might not have to depend on any day job again. Kat waved an arm at the 11 empty black leather chairs around the table. Look at these. They're like giant Darth Vader helmets. Kat covered her mouth with both hands and breathed the words through her fingers. We're your father, Kat. All of us. She laughed hard, gripping the thick table to stop from sliding under. Straightening, she somehow filled the whole chair. Bless Kat. She needed that hit. Kat plonked into the Darth Vader helmet next to her, grinning. Girl, if you thought that was hilarious, you need an 80-20 weekend. Huh? 80% sex, 20% booze, and sleep. She liked everything about Kat, except how the damn woman saw right through her. Unless you pick up another two boys from Barcelona like at the Purple Days Festival last summer, then you have permission to go 100% raunchy. Those dudes were so ripped, don't know how you didn't end up in ICU. More laughter crashed through her deserted body until she saw Kat stiffen and switch back to her war face. Chirpy meeting's a good meeting, said Delaney, striding through the doors to the opposite side of the table. She almost choked, trying to anchor her laughter, straightened, and breathed deeply to release the pressure on her pharynx, larynx, and trachea, the precious triangle protecting her deserted gift. Delaney wasn't the devil. He was as passionate about music as her. While she chose flight with a giant boulder shattered her singing path, he chose to fight the mountain of corporate bullshit to keep Melbourne's and one of the world's leading indie labels relevant. Please share. I could do with a laugh. He slid into the chair like it was custom made, waving his iPad between them. Annie hesitated. Maybe a joke or two would help their mission, get Delaney into softer space before stating their project demands. When you laugh, it's the closest your face gets to your old performance magic, said Delaney. Your spotlight cheekbones and sparkly brown eyes. Not as mesmerizing as when you used to sing, but we're all under the pump, so let's get straight into this. She patted the posters on the table. Delaney had done enough self-softening. Why don't you start, Kat? Her sweet tone, a 180 contrast to the tension coiling in her tummy. Annie thanked the stars she could control her voice because her face was a WikiLeaks on skin. Kat leant on the table, shoulders hunched forward, a jungle lion poised to pounce. You built this label on discovering awesome performers. Delaney nodded. But 73% of the company's profits come from our publishing division, even though we only represent 19% of expenses and 13% of staff. Staff, huh? For publishing, staff read her, Kat, and a couple of admin supports, plus an endless procession of starry-eyed interns. Delaney stared at his iPad. Boys and their tech toys. His elusive attention span was why they'd prepare the rock-style posters. She tapped Kat's calf. Kat lifted the top poster. Publishing equals profits. Annie pitched her tone a touch higher, a little louder. But publishing revenue has stagnated and is diving. Delaney's wild salt and pepper eyebrows nearly reached his wilder hair, focused on the poster now. Strangled by the contemporary focus on singer-songwriters and DJ producers with catchy names but limited creativity. She pointed at the next poster Kat picked up. Industry-choking songwriters. Pure songwriters don't have a chance to break through. Performers can always busk, do free pub gigs, YouTube, a ton of social media, said Kat. Delaney glanced at his iPad, so Kat sped up her spiel. Plus, glamour shows like The Voice and Every Pimple's Got Talent. Delaney tapped his iPad. There's SoundCloud and other. Not enough, said Annie. Eurovision Song Contest. Never miss that show. Delaney tilted his chair back, fingers interlaced, hands around the back of his silver hair. Eurovision has become a circus for performers, said Kat. May as well call it Cirque du Sold Out the Songwriter. I bet you don't remember the writers of last year's winning song, but you remember what that woman from Poland was almost wearing. No reaction. Worse, he typed on his iPad. Loud voices from staff heading home drifted under the heavy wooden doors. She tapped Kat's calf again, maybe more than a tap. Kat glared, but there was nothing to gain by challenging Delaney. A and R used to stand for artists and repertoire. Lately, it's become angles and revenue, said Kat. Delaney stopped typing and smiled. This contest will help us flush out real talent and rebuild some street cred for the label. Huh. Credibility with a name like Merger Music? The investment bankers probably patted the back of each other's charcoal gray suits at their amazing creativity with the alliteration of M. Kat held up the final poster. Merger Music Annual Songwriting Contest equals street cred plus more profits. Love it, said Delaney. His words bubbled around Annie's veins in a cocktail of adrenaline and endorphins. Does that mean you'll back it? Kat's suspicion dripped from deep corporate scars. Yes, he tapped the iPad. The weekly voting format by the punters is a cool idea. He'd actually read the one-pager. Kat morphed from war lion to a grinning Cheshire. Just one thing I'd like to add to your plan. She whipped her head at Delaney, increased the budget by 20%. Of all the Delaney responses they'd prepare for, that wasn't on their list. You'll confirm all that for us in an email? She asked. Just did, and CC JP, our finance maestro. Fucking love this idea. He grabbed the table with arms wide. It's going to be a bigger success than you imagined. Ella Fitzgerald's Summertime trickled out of Annie's memory bank and tickled every nerve and muscle to her core. That's why Robbie from marketing has to lead the project. Horror punk, grindcore, crack rock. Anger thrashed around her head. Couldn't find a way out. Delaney was the devil. After all the mergers, all the fiscal battles, he'd diluted into a musical midget and couldn't read the room if it was written on the wall. She was delusional or too loyal, believing he was still bona fide rock and roll. Delaney glanced at his iPad on the table, then leaned back, hands behind his head, grinning. Annie wanted to smash that head into the table and leave a mold of his smug face with shades of blood on the shiny mahogany, but she'd never stand a chance. Kat would get there first. Crash. Kat had jumped up, her Darth Vader chair smashing against the bluestone wall, Sia t-shirt barely containing her heaving chest. Don't need help, not that cocky little gherkin from... Robbie strutted through the doors in a rock t-shirt from the same online store as Delaney's. Jeans cut in the trendy places, but tighter than his boss. Boots instead of sneakers. He settled into the chair on Delaney's right, opposite Kat, placing his identical iPad on the table parallel with Delaney's in sickening digital sycophancy. His aftershave drifted in a few seconds behind him, like an entourage, obtrusive, suffocating. Sorry, I'm 5 minutes late, Robbie said to Delaney with the innocent and huggable tone of Ed Sheeran. 5 minutes late? The bastards planned this. The syrupy tone and his entourage were all show, surface stuff. Acid gurgled from her tummy, up her esophagus. Breathe, breathe. Delaney focused on Kat, his survival instincts kicking in, sitting straighter, hands gripping his chair. He still didn't stand a chance. Death metal swirled in Kat's green eyes under super short parted hair, a nod to Audrey Hepburn, aside from being bright blue. A few tools had underestimated the passion within Kat's 152-centimeter frame, but never more than once. She was tempted to let Kat loose. Despite the callous mismanagement of their supposed CEO, she had to drag herself out from her inner acid bath and save the project. Save Kat from a murder trial. She stood, blocking Kat. Hey, Robbie, glad you could join us. Her voice threw a calming blanket over inner turmoil and boardroom tension. Except Kat. Kat rocked back and forth like she was about to spring over and rip his throat with bared teeth. Hi, Annie. Kat. You don't have to stand for me. More fake Ed Sheeran. Always assume positive intent. Her dad's mantra, which she'd ignored most of her life. Maybe Robbie went to the same room reading school as Delaney, oblivious to the emotion bouncing off the walls, the territory he was stealing from them. Hard-earned territory. Always assume positive intent. She grabbed Kat with one hand and pulled her in a chair with the other, forcing Kat to sit. Robbie's got some creative gems, said Delaney, waving his arm at Robbie to share. His next creative gem would be his virgin creative gem. But she gripped Kat's lower arm and let her voice do its thing. Many heads make light work. I'll make light work out of his head, mumbled Kat. Robbie stared at Kat, who glared back. No contest. He turned to the safe territory of Delaney. Delaney burst out laughing, every sound a false note. You're going to love working with these two, Robbie. Laugh a minute. Go on. Tell him your ideas. Always assume positive intent until he gives me ammunition to blast him out of the building. Robbie swiped his iPad, took a big breath, then faced her. I thought we could produce a documentary on the craft of songwriting. It could feature Australian songwriters from all genres. We can release the interviews across our social media. With a decent production crew, we'll probably get to screen it as a feature documentary on Channel V or ABC2. Kat's arm muscles relaxed under her grip. Annie let go and placed her elbows on the table, head resting on her hands between thumbs and fingers. 1, it was a brilliant idea. 2, they'd never thought of it. 3, maybe they'd underestimated Robbie. I like that, Robbie. It's right on theme with what we want to achieve for Merger Music, Annie said. A few strands of hair had dropped over her right eye, making it twitch. Damned if she was going to touch her hair right now with him all puppy eyes, so she blew air up at it and flicked her face a little. With cowboys like Robbie, it was better to come across dorky Annie than flirty. Of course, the contest will be dominated by many of our own artists, past and present, said Delaney. Can't be filled with proven performers, only unpublished songwriters, said Kat, gripping the table like a vice, the tips of her fingers white under black painted nails. Robbie continued, focusing on Annie. That makes sense. Your one-pager is quite clear. Silly bugger didn't have the courage to face Kat, so Annie nodded gently at the 28-year-old man-boy. Tell them your masterpiece, Delaney turned to her and Kat. Pure genius. A huge grin was framed by his arms as he leaned back, hands behind his head again. Robbie swiped to another page on his iPad, proud pouring out of his cheeks, a few centimeters taller in the chair after Delaney's ego inflation. I've been researching the top 10 hits over the last 5 years and worked out what type of songs we need to manipulate the contest for. Kat bounced up, chair slingshotting into the wall again, then slammed both her hands on the table. Crash, slap, slap. Deep in Annie's musical conscience, she noted the rhythmic percussion riff, but her frontal lobe screamed. How could he make one smart step forward, then slip 5,000 steps back into the abyss of a stupidity? Manipulate? Manipulate? Hissed Kat. Delaney stared at the thick double doors, possibly admiring their strength to stay on their hinges, probably thinking of making his escape. Robbie sat back, holding up his iPad like a shield, eyes so wide and white his pupils must have run for cover. This contest is all about music lovers voting for the songs. Raw music meets raw emotions, not some manipulated, man-marketing, man-gimmick like all the other manure around here lately. She stood and turned to Delaney. If you don't revise your decision about... Kat flicked a hand in Robbie's direction. I'm going to... She tapped Kat, aiming for the softer calf again, but Kat moved and Annie's toe hit her shin bone. Ouch! Kat plonked onto her chair and rubbed her shin. Annie diva glared at Delaney. Behind the headline posters, behind the full proposal Delaney had probably never read, Annie and Kat had poured dozens of hours into planning the mechanics. They could launch the contest tomorrow. There was reasoning for dumping someone from marketing to help them, as neither she nor Kat had run a project like this. But putting Robbie in charge? Unforgivable. Delaney was living down to Kat's moniker, DeLooney. Surely he realized his mistake now he'd seen their reaction. Look, I'd hate to see it go that way, but if you're not comfortable with my decision, Robbie can pick his own team. Track 2. Robbie's gaze stayed glued on Annie. Super glued. The fire sparkling from her eyes was like the first time he'd seen a nighttime bonfire. Focus, Robbie. He blinked twice, then turned to his iPad. The screen had gone black, and his reflection reminded him of the main game. Delaney had thrown him more than he expected, but he was ready. This contest was the kind of opportunity that skyrocketed reputations, and he'd worked hard to reach this rock and roll launching pad. Annie turned from Delaney to him. God, she's beautiful. Not just hot. Beautiful. He had to make this work. Work for his career, for Delaney, for any chance with Annie. We have to find a collaborative groove on this. It's your concept, he said, struggling to get a handle on Annie. It was difficult to not gape at her cleavage since the woman turned V-neck t-shirts into a weapon of dumb destruction. Delaney had taught him early on that if you ever want to know how someone feels about you, gauge his or her partner. Kat wasn't romantically linked with Annie, but she was a partner on this project. He consciously forced his neck muscles to include Kat, but she projected some scary feral energy. Surely Annie wasn't hiding that kind of anger. He turned back to her. We're excited to groove on the contest with you, Robbie. Ton of other little jobs to clear before we can focus on this, so we'd better get to it. Annie stood, dragging Kat up. Robbie stood, stared. You don't have to stand up for us, said Kat. Let's meet again in 3 weeks to synchronize our ideas, Annie said before ushering Kat away. Yeah, sure. 3 weeks. I'll Google Calendar you, both of you. Perfect. We'll Google Calendar back. She bundled Kat through the door. Robbie followed Annie's exit until the last strand of her brown hair fluttered out of sight. Was that a wink? Looked like she winked, flicked her head back and winked at me. He sat down and set up the calendar meeting on his iPad. They loved your ideas, said Delaney. One of them, 50% in, is still in. They just need time to get used to sharing. You know, women and their babies, python possessive, a biological mongrel instinct from 30,000 years of evolution. He nodded. I did have some rapport with Annie. See the way she jumped up when I came in? That had never happened to him before. It was usually him jumping up like a wimp in a music scene where gentleman stuff was decided by women. Oh, fuck. I jumped up like a chump when Annie stood. No wonder Kat made fun of me. The first time he'd glimpsed Annie when he started last year sent a buzz through his core, just like the opening notes of his favorite AC/DC track, You Shook Me All Night Long. His curiosity hit a wall because she was an anomaly for a 26-year-old, totally off the social media circus. Unbelievable. He'd seen some photos floating around the net from her early performances, but that was 9 years ago. She hadn't caved into the Kardashian lips trap, her mouth a perfect organic sculpture under the cute nose and those cheekbones. In marketing terms, her packaging was powerful. Delaney had let him listen to her demo album, which never got released back then. What a waste. The success he could have promoting Annie. Maybe this contest would be a curvy path to relaunching her career, or set up a nice vibe between them so he could ask her out. But not if he always jumped like a chump around her. Yep, you're in. Make it work. And don't forget those other ideas. Just don't dump all the apples into one lunchbox, said Delaney. Royal blood, figure it out. The positive riff pulsed through his veins, pushing his face into a grin. It buzzed to hear the validation from Delaney. This was his first major project as lead, and he wasn't going to let his guru down. Surely Kat was just having a bad day. Maybe time of month stuff. Once they got stuck into the contest, even she would like him. Maybe that was overreaching. Annie. Focus on Annie. Divide and conquer. And what a conquest.